Hey everyone, the name is Kris Barocsi, and today I wanted to talk about something that's really interesting. Depending on your taste, you'll hate it or love it, but guitar tone is changing. And I know that it's been like this forever. There's always a change, a constant evolution or revolution, depending on, the times we're living in. But we don't sound like the Beatles anymore. We don't sound like Hendrix. We don't sound like Jimmy Page. There's an evolution. That's normal. And of course, there was the 80s, which changed everything for a while at least. And I'm aware of all of that, but I think there's a big difference here, and that is closely related to the type of gear modern guitar players are using, which is very important to point out, I think, because that is going to be the point of reference for future generation guitar players. That is going to be the inspiration for a lot of young kids who just pick up the guitar. That is the first point I want to talk about. The point of reference is changing. I know, as mentioned, it's always been this way. Like, I don't know, no one wanted to sound like his parents or her parents' favorite bands, because that's like, music for grandmas and grandpas. That's like normal, right? If you're a teenager, you want to do something else. You want to do it differently. It's been the same for me when I started. It's going to be the same for young kids who are just, turning 14 now or whatever. The big difference this time is that those modern guitar players that inspire kids use usually modelers or plugins, something that is not a traditional signal chain, a traditional rig. I know that there are exceptions. There's always going to be an exception. But for the most part, if you scroll through your TikTok or Instagram or whatever social media and see all those crazy impressive guitar players, most of those barely ever used an amp. And even if they go on stage and play live, they'll take their modelers, they'll use in-ears, and they'll have their presets prepared for the show. It's just a very different kind of gear that allows you to get very different sounds. And I think that's important to point out, that even though all these multi-effects and modelers base their models and their simulations on traditional amps and gear, still, you have very different possibilities when using one of these. Like, you can use certain filters, you can boost or cut certain frequencies. You can get even frequencies that will never appear in a traditional guitar rig. There are frequencies that a guitar speaker just cannot produce. It's not made that way. These are not hi-fi full range speakers. These very much focus on the mid-range, from like a lower mid to an upper mid-range, and that's it. It doesn't really have bass, it doesn't really have a lot of treble. But if you're using a modeler, you can boost certain frequencies that, as told, are not even existing in a guitar rig. It gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of possibilities to be creative about your sound, and some people really are. And whether you like that new approach and new kind of sound or not, it's up to you, of course. It doesn't really matter, because it will not change the big picture, right? It's happening. It's all those Tim Henson style guitar players who just go for something very untraditional and want to avoid sounding pretty, want to sound weird or interesting or just different. That is happening. And these young guitar heroes or inspirational guitar players will be the idols of new generation players. So they will not say like, I want to sound like Slash, I want to sound like Jimmy Page or Jimi Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan. They will say like, I want to sound like this or that person. And that is a huge difference, and all comes back to what these new generation inspirational guitar players use, which is usually a modeler or plugin or something similar. And this is what I mean by that. I have this this lick or song snippet that I will record with a very much traditional rig, using my modded Strat into a nice drive, into a clean Fender style amp. And the only modder thing is the cap simulation, the aux box, because I just cannot allow 115 dBs here in this room. It's what it is. I love that, but it sounds very much identical to an actual mic'd cabinet. So this is my traditional rig, and then I'll play the same thing with a coil split humbucker, active Fishman humbucker in my Hardband Fusion 2, going straight into the computer, using plugins. These are just going to be a universal audio compressor and amp sim and whatever reverb and everything to capture that kind of vibe that I hear on a lot of these modern recordings and like the flashy social media guitar players. So let's see how that compares. And that's the thing, if I hear this guitar sound, I cannot stop playing because that is just my ideal guitar tone. It's dirty, it's nasty. It has a good balance between pretty and nasty. And that is just what is easy to get with a really nice traditional guitar rig if you just pick the components right to fit your taste. And when I hear the other sound with my the Harley going into the audio interface, I don't use any pedals or amps or anything. When I'm using that, I'm going straight with the guitar cable into the interface, audio interface that is connected to the computer, and all the sounds, like except for the guitar's line signal, are coming from plugins. There's the compressor, the amp simulation, the reverb. All those are just digital emulations, really. I wanted to intentionally go for that. A bit more artificial, a bit more modern, aggressive sound that you'll hear a lot. What will happen with all these like old school stuff, right? Tube amps, analog pedals, old school guitars, Les Pauls, Tellys, Strats, whatever. Will we get rid of all of that because young kids will only get inspired by headless multi-scale guitars and active pickups with coil split and whatever? I think there's a very important point here that a lot of people ignore when talking about this, and that is that young people usually become adults and then a little older even, and usually I think you know already where I'm going with this. They start with just going for something different. It just has to be different because otherwise it's lame, it's grandpa stuff, right? Then you become an adult and then you start to appreciate traditional stuff, and then you become a little older and then you just love all that old stuff and don't really care for new stuff, because then all of a sudden you're not the new person, so all the new stuff coming up will just make you want to say like, what is that crap? I don't like that. I like the old stuff that we did when we were young. So I don't think these old school stuff, you know, traditional amps and whatever, will ever disappear, because every generation will become adults and middle-aged and old at one point. And usually people start turning towards old school stuff. In the same way as like cars, if you're into beautiful cars or nice, you know, drivers' cars, there's always going to be a place for old-timer cars, right? I just love late 60s Chevy Camaros and old BMWs and old, I don't know, Datsuns and all those Japanese cars. I love old cars. If I had the money, my garage would be huge, full of all those old stuff. And I would drive a modern car probably because I don't want troubles when I just go to work or go to the grocery store. I just want something that is modern and still have space in my life for something that I love. And that is exactly how I see this happening. Young people will always look for something new and will probably ignore tube amps until they're 30. And then they realize, oh, wait a second, I think that's really cool. So I'll just use my modern stuff when I need that, and I'll appreciate and love an old Tweed, you know, Fender amp or old Marshall or whatever analog overdrive pedal whenever I feel like, oh yeah, today I wanna jam on that. And I think that's the reason why these old stuff will never disappear. It doesn't matter what kind of evolution is happening in terms of guitar tones. The grandpa stuff is just gonna be perfect and timeless for whichever generation of grandpas we're talking about. Because, you know, I did this interview with Tim and Scott of Polyphia just a few months ago, really, on the Thomann channel. And I asked them, like, hey, do you see yourself using like old school guitar gear, like tube amps and loud stuff? And they were like, oh, we just started. We are using JCM 800s on stage. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, look at you. You know, they all started on Axifix and whatever, just using modular stuff, headphones, no amps, no stuff like that. And then look at them, the new generation guitar heroes inspiring so many people started using amps together with their modular. So I can totally see them in 10 years rocking, you know, a full stack and just a super clever MIDI controlled pedal board and no modulars. It could happen. This is just, I think, the nature of things. The same way as guitar tone is always changing, and it always evolves into something new. And there's, you know, there are moments of revolution, like the modern amps coming in, the dual rectifiers and the PV 5150 and all those amps. That was a revolution for heavy guitar tones. And the same way, I think this is just gonna keep on happening, all the modelers and digital stuff. But the old school stuff is just so timeless and so perfect, and nothing compares to just cranking a simple tube amp at a proper volume and just playing few notes. That feeling is always gonna stay magical. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you experience that and have a moment where you just feel it, you'll never forget about it. All right, see you down there in the comments below. Let me know what you think about this, because hey, this is just one opinion. It doesn't really matter. All right, take it easy and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.